And then there we go. And then we'll start our podcast. So thank you all very much for coming. For those that don't know me, my name is Rome Celli. I am the host of this podcast. We call it Outside the Frame. And that's a little bit tongue in cheek because there are several podcasts locally that are referred to as Behind the Glass, Behind the Studio Door. And if you think about those names, they're really referring to the art that's behind the glass and the artist that's behind the door. And in this case, we're really not focused as artists. We're focused outside the frame. We are really the onlookers, the public, although some of us on the call and participating in the game are artists. That's the nature of why the name is what it is. I was having a little fun with behind the glass and behind the door. Let me give you a quick run of show, and then we'll jump into the details. The first 15, 20 minutes or so will be about Red Dot Challenge Season 1. I'll give a quick overview, and we'll talk a little bit about what's happened so far. We're about 6 weeks into the game, and there's quite a lot to talk about, but I'll give a summary of that. And then we're going to hear from our featured guest tonight, who, if they want to, can talk a little bit about what they're working on at the moment and any other topic they want to talk about. We're also going to hear we have several players on the call, which they'll be introduced here shortly. And then we're going to talk about the regional art scene in our area. So let me get started by, we have somebody just joining us now. Kathleen is going to join us now. And she was on the first Zoom last month, so she's familiar with what these are like. And Kathleen, thank you for joining us. I know I think you had some connection issues before, so you couldn't always be on video, but we do see you. So what I'm going to do initially is just briefly read the 3 quick paragraphs that describe the game. The first one is just a quick overview of the game, and I'm going to read this verbatim so I don't miss anything. Red Dot Challenge is a fantasy art collecting game with a social media twist that takes place in real time at real places with real art, and everybody in the public participates alongside the players. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The object of the game is each player must identify a fantasy art collection depicting at least 7 works of art. It could be 700, but at least 7 works of art that taken together is in some way meaningful to the player. Players must complete their fantasy art collection within the time frame of the game and without exceeding their fantasy budget, which we'll talk about in just a minute. The purposes of the game. Red Dot Challenge is a fun way to learn about artists and art venues while following the player's progress. The game encourages players and the public to think deeply about art and assess the developing of fantasy art collections in real time. Game organizers hope the engagement with the game will lead people to purchase art in real life. And I want to emphasize that just briefly in saying there's been some, I don't know if confusion is quite the right word, but perhaps misunderstanding is a better way to describe it. This is a fantasy game. The players are not actually taking art off the wall and putting it someplace else. They're taking pictures of the art, and we'll talk about that briefly in a minute. But it's a fantasy game. There's a fantasy budget. And although there are some players who are actually purchasing the work for their private collections. I know this because they've told me. And I have actually purchased work during the game frame as well for my collection. That's a normal thing that we do as collectors. Maybe you do that too. But that is apart from the gameplay. Gameplay is November 1st to January 31st. It's a 3-month period of gameplay. We have 12 players and there are 12 collections. Each player is associated with a fantasy art collection. There are 3 fantasy budgets. So there are 4 players, each playing at one of 3 levels. There's a $1,000 level, there's a $5,000 level, and there's a $10,000 level. And so 4 players are identifying art with a value no greater than 7 works, $5,000, $1,000, and $10,000. Players must visit venues in person to identify the work. They can't just look online. They have to go in person. and they take a picture of the work, and that picture gets posted into a fantasy art collection album. And we'll talk about that very, very briefly soon. The works, I'm going to read something else verbatim. The works chosen by Red Dot Challenge Season 1 players for their fantasy art collections are not being purchased with real money. Red Dot Challenge is the fantasy art collecting game. In all instances, the artists retain their copyright and all their legal rights. We're not taking anybody's art over. We're not doing anything with the art. We're just pretending to collect art. That's the nature of the game. Now, I want to describe something to you that's going to sound a little bit odd. It sounds like it's one game, but it's actually two games that are happening simultaneously. I've described the part of the game where the players are engaged, but simultaneous to the players, the public also plays. It's, as I say, happens at the same time and overlapping. The public, there are three challenges the public can participate in the game in, which I will now describe. Challenge one is to correctly identify an artist whose work has been put into a fantasy art collection. Here's how it works. The works are added on Monday mornings. They remain, the venues identified, the titles identified, the prices identified, but for 2 days, the artist is not identified. And the public is asked to try and identify those artists within 2 days. If they're not identified by Tuesday night, for example, tonight, on tomorrow morning, anything that's not identified will be linked to the artist and identified by the artist. It's just a fun way to see if we get people go to venues and research using Instagram and Facebook and so forth. The second challenge is one in which, I described this before the podcast started. Let me review. The players are, we know that we've disclosed the player's name, but we have not disclosed which player is associated with which fantasy art collection. The public is challenged to try to identify which player is collecting what fantasy art collection. So challenge number 2 is to try to figure out who is collecting what, to match the players with their collections. The third challenge has not been published yet. The third challenge is, by the way, the first two of those are somewhat competitive, right? You see who's first and who's right. The third one is non-competitive. In the third challenge, we're going to ask people to respond to the collections, to tell us what they think of these collections. We're going to have a way for people to do that, and we're hoping to collect the data and present the data at a big reveal event in February. So the gameplay ends on January 31st. We're going to have an event at Rochester Contemporary at a date we have not yet nailed down, but in early February, at which the players will be associated with their fantasy art collections. We'll talk about what people were thinking with the data that they responded to the collections, and we'll give away some prizes. We'll do some other things as well. And that topic will be the subject of our third and final podcast on January 14th. All right, so I've covered a lot of ground. I've done nothing but talk. Let me quickly introduce who's on the call. Although we're not going to go into detail right now, let me just do a quick overview. We have several featured guests. We have Adam Eaton from Rochester Artist Collaborative. We're going to talk with him in a little bit. Eric Lehman, who is affiliated with many things, 1975 Gallery, Wall Therapy. We'll talk with him in a bit. And we have Nick Koch, who you might also know as Rock Street Photos. I think I've got that right. And he'll also have a chance to talk about what he's working on.
It's actually pronounced Cook.
Cook, I'm sorry, Rock.
It's okay. You did the same thing that every human I've ever met does. So offense taken.
Thanks for the correction. Okay, before we get into gameplay, let me just tell people that all the information about the game, comprehensive, is on a website called red.challenge.org. Now, it never occurred to me that when I put the word dot in the name of the game, that some people, I'm sorry, I didn't name the players. Kelly reminds me. Let me go ahead and name the players. They're going to chime in too, and I apologize. I should have done that a minute ago. We have several players with us on the call. We have Mike Millars on the call. We have Reagan McCann's on the call. We have Sue Mandel and Seth Ozer is on the call, and they're playing as a team. We have Matt Vanderlee's on the call, and we also have Kelly Cheadle with us on the call, although Kelly might be suffering from laryngitis, so I'm not sure we're going to hear from her necessarily tonight. Let me go back and just say all the information about the game, including the collections, the updates, the rules, everything comprehensive is on red.challenge.org. When I named the game Red Dot Challenge, it never occurred to me that when I say it out loud, some people might think the URL is red dot period challenge.org. It's not. It's reddotchallenge.org. So it's red dot, the words red.challenge.org. It's also on, we're on Instagram at red dot challenge, and we are on Facebook under Rochester Art Collectors. And if you want to talk about, we can talk about why we did that, but that's where everything is located. So I've read the summary, I've gone through that. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about gameplay. And I'm going to just do this very, very briefly. Gameplay, this is week number 6. In week number 6, we had 6 players contribute to their fantasy art collections. They contributed a total of 24 works of art this past week. And that has a retail value of about $10,000. So quite a lot of activity this week. Player number 2 added 2 works. Player number 4 added 3 works. Player number 5 was very active. Player number 5 added 10 works to their fantasy art collection this week. Player number 7 added 5 works. Player number 10 added 2, and player number 12 added 2. I should have mentioned the first 2 are playing at a $1,000 fantasy art budget, the second 2 at $5,000 fantasy art budget, and the last 2 are playing at the $10,000 fantasy art budget. All right, I'm going quickly on this because I want to cover ground. Since November 1st, since gameplay began, there are 46 works in the collections, and that's about $20,000 retail value for those works. Now, again, we're not spending real money. This is fantasy dollars. The work has not left the walls of the venues. All people are doing is taking pictures and adding them to social media and to the website. That's an average of about $420 per piece. So I'm going to ask the players briefly, if you want to, who wants to just chat about the experience? Anything you want to share about the experience? Reagan, go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been, or at least for me, I've been actively trying to go to venues that I wouldn't normally go to. I can't be specific about that without giving away some details about what I might have collected, but actively using this as an opportunity to try to figure out where collectors could go that are outside of the ordinary. So places like coffee shops, or I publicly posted this, like places like Sense by Design, which is just a regular business that also happens to feature a gallery wall, or places like Lumiere, which have the same thing. So just trying to find new places to find art at.
Interesting. So Reagan, let me just note that the players may post the works that they're considering. They just don't identify them as in the collection. So it's okay to talk about where you've been. Anybody else want to chime in? Any of the other players want to chime in on the experience of playing Red Dot Challenge Season 1?
Well, I would just build on what Reggie said by saying I'm trying to do a similar thing. I mean, to me, um, one of the strengths of the project is the idea of getting the word out on where art is available for purchase and who's trying to sell it in Rochester. So in that same vein, I've been trying to go to the places that are off the map and challenging myself to discover exactly what those places are. I was excited to find one spot this first Friday that all they got's an address, because they don't have a name. You know, they're not the Block Collective, and they're not the such and such center. You know, so it's been an interesting process of finding new places and finding new opportunities to look at art in town. And also it's weird because it's like, I don't think, I don't know, if like this is just what the other half lives like, but like this is too much art. Like I'm pretend buying so much art, you know? And it's like, so like to buy it at this clip is a strange experience, and my house would be full of joy, but a little overfull at the same time. If
I tell you, as an actual real life, maybe you're collectors also. I shouldn't assume you're not, but as somebody who buys art, this time of year is extremely stressful for me because I don't have unlimited money, and there are thousands of works for sale, and there are many of them are just absolutely fabulous that I would love to own. But of course, I can't own them all. And where would I put them all, as you say? Who else wants to talk about the experience?
Well,
Go ahead, Kelly,
one,
jump in.
um,
Oh, I
what,
think Mike's.
go ahead.
Oh, Mike, do you want to go? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, what I was saying is I was fortunate to actually meet the some of the artists, a few of them. So that was really a good experience to talk to them and actually explain to them what we were doing, and they were very appreciative. So
Now, that's one of my favorite things to do too. In fact, I love to do studio visits as well. Kelly, you had something?
I've got a chance to visit some locations that are more retail based, so like that are really designed to sell and feature local artists. And for example, I don't know if I'm not really giving away anything that I went to
Oh,
Craft
you
Company.
posted.
Yeah, I went to Craft Company #6, and I could probably spend the entire 10 weeks just wandering around there because they have so many pieces.
Hmm.
And as much as I am a big picture person, it's those tiny details. And so like they have so many like cabinets of jewelry, small artworks. Um, there's so much just in one place sometimes that you could spend hours just wandering through and looking for things, which I'm enjoying because it's like a lot of times I don't give myself the time to sit and enjoy, and this is forcing me to look at artwork. So thank you.
It's really a kind of an embarrassment of riches. And when we start talking about the regional art scene, one of the things we could talk about if you want to is what I'll call the sort of macroeconomics of the local art market, which is the relationship between supply and demand, which is obviously a very powerful one in any economic environment. But in the art world, there's a lot of supply, even in this is an enormous amount of supply this time of year, but even in an off month, an off season, if you will, there's still a lot of artists working, producing work, presenting work. And that supply and demand relationship can make it tricky. Sue, do you and Seth want to chat about your experience at all? You don't have
So uh, we've been out of town and we went to the ROCO members. Oh, I shouldn't be saying that. Should I be saying that?
That's perfect.
Everyone did.
Oh,
Rocco, I've never heard
okay.
of that place.
But we didn't go on opening night because we just got back to town. So we went the next day and ran into X number of people, including you, Rome.
Yeah, right.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that either. Oh, geez. Um, And so, because we don't really know what we're doing, like shooting the ones that were way up on top, we're supposed to ask for a ladder. And I shot one, but I didn't get the tag. So, um,
Right.
and
So
yeah,
the rules require players to go in person to the venue and take a picture, typically with a mobile phone. And in the case of Rochester Contemporary, it's a salon style installation, which is to say floor to ceiling. It's hung up high and down low. And so you're there as an individual taking a picture of something that's, 10 feet off the ground. And the quality of the picture does not disqualify it. But we want to try to make sure that the price is publicly available. One of the rules of the game is it has to be either posted with the work or in a price list at the venue. And one of the easy ways to do the task is to, in your picture, include the label, just so you can show that it was priced there in the venue. And if people have questions about that, we can talk about that. So
Both of us being short, it's very difficult to do the high one.
well, Rocco, there aren't too many people that could get the top level for sure. But so when the pictures are sent, oftentimes I find myself having to tweak a little bit here and there just to get them to be a little less quirky looking in terms of the way they're presented on the screen. So we're coming up on 20 minutes. I'd like to go ahead and move into the featured guest portion of this. And Adam, if you're willing, why don't you start off and tell the public about Rochester Artist Collaborative, And I think you're working on a really important project at the moment. I don't want to break any news here that shouldn't be broken, but I think you've made it somewhat public. If you want to touch on that, then please do. But welcome and thanks for coming. And go ahead, tell us.
Hello, I'm Adam Eaton, the director of Rochester Artist Collaborative. So Rochester Artist Collaborative, we support local artists with resources, opportunities, um, and really a big part of what we do is just providing information to artists that sometimes is available, but a lot of times artists don't know where to look or how to access it. So just really taking information, resources, opportunities, and making it easily available to artists, promote it through social media, and our easy to access website. Um, we are actually going to be changing our name. I don't know if that's the idea you were thinking of,
That it
Ron.
was. I was very interested. Yeah.
Yes, so Rochester Arts Collaborative is going to be moving to a more of a national, international organization. We've seen that lots of artists nationally are interested to join as a member and also internationally. So we're changing the name from Rochester Artist Collaborative to just the Artist Collaborative. And so that will make it easier as we expand to support more artists in our region, in our state of New York, but also eventually internationally. So yeah, we're excited about that. We're excited about getting more funding to support artists and their work. We're going to be working with the Yards coming in 2025 for group art exhibitions. So if you know any artists that want to join as a member, we're going to be promoting that idea so that we can continue to support artists in the ways that we do and make sure that they have the tools to be successful.
Well, I'm really amazed. Both you and your brother are sort of gifted entrepreneurs. And you're repositioning, you're rebranding, you're identifying market segments. I mean, you do this with such skill and a natural sensibility. Is this something was this part of your life growing up, or your folks, were they in small businesses, or how do you come to these skills?
Well, so my mother actually is an entrepreneur. She's been a hairstylist all her life.
Mhm.
Um, and my mother and father actually worked very hard. My dad's actually been at one company for like his whole working career. So the ideas about like working hard, um, you're doing a good job, quality work, those type of things, being kind to people, relationship building has always been a part of my upbringing. I found that working with artists can be difficult. There's a lot of different personalities. Artists are very passionate about their work. So the idea of me being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I studied the Bible, and that's part of my upbringing about being kind and loving and caring about your family, your friends, your community, and making sure that you're always doing your best to make sure that people have what they need, and to just care for people and build relationships so that we can all grow together.
Well, it's very apparent in everything that you and your brother do. It's really quite inspirational. Will you just briefly touch on the Artist Collaborative, formerly Rochester Artist Collaborative, is a venue to present work, and some of what's presented is available for sale. Will you talk about that briefly?
Yes, so we do have our online directory where artists are featured and their artist profiles, and then that links to their artist work directly. We actually like the idea of having artists be able to be empowered through Rochester Artist Collaborative. The idea that we're giving the artists the tool that they need to be able to be a small business. Artists are really entrepreneurs. Artists are really small business owners. So if they have the tools to be able to promote their work, showcase their work, we're just helping them to do that. But we do have in-person events like our gallery events, group exhibitions, so that the public can also see, meet, connect, network with artists. And it gives them a platform to be able to sell their work if they would like, but also just show their work to the world. And a big part of that also is with our social media platform as well.
So people can come to your main space to see work, but they can also go to a place like Red, White, and Brew to see an exhibition that you coordinated. And I think, if I remember correctly, Matt, did you help with that show somehow?
Yeah, I've had the privilege of helping the Artist Collaborative with a number of really cool projects. Me and Adam and a very cool person named Shannon are going to be hanging out at the library on Thursday, actually going through their grants database, which I'm pretty excited about. But yeah, in the within the context of our game here, Rochester, or I'm sorry, Artist Collaborative artists are currently gathered at Red, White, and Brew, where we've got a group exhibition up that I helped hang and organize under the banner of my silly little business, Hungwell Art Services.
And this is something you've done for in other venues as well, which we can talk about later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Thank you.
just goes into the outside, just that goes, thank you, Matt, for all the hard work. That just goes into the idea of like how artists really are business owners, small business owners. Matt Vanderley is an artist, but also he has grown his practice to include other services. And so the network and economy of arts is important that we support artists and give them the tool that they need to be successful. And it's good to see other members of Rochester Artist Collaborative on the call right now. So thank you so much for being a part of it.
Nice. Nice. Well, it's a great community. Eric, what are you up to?
Right now, healing from hand surgery.
Oh no.
So,
Any good scars to show us? I mean,
I do. There actually, I'm under
oh,
now
nice.
because my hand's a little sore. No, it was a very busy year. I put on a show called Sketchy, down at the RIT City Art Space over the summer that was focused on skateboarding art and creativity. Um, where that was through 1975. Wall therapy is we're working on some stuff for 2025. Part of the problem is our organizing group, which for this wall therapy is mural project here in town, based here in town. That's done about over 156 murals since 2011. Um, it's a small core team doing it, and sometimes when I've got a big project, being in the middle of that, one thing has to give for the other. So this year I was focusing more on the 1975 side, but no, we're working on some stuff for next year. Just because we
So let me
missed
ask you a question.
Street.
What is your favorite holiday of the year? And
Oh,
what happens on that holiday?
oh, Halloween, my friends. Yeah, no, it's so normally, so October is the anniversary of 1975, which established 2008. Every year I would always do like a Halloween themed art show. Then COVID hit, and then since COVID, life gets in the way at times. So I had pivoted to doing, borrowing from a good friend, John Magnus Champlin's Christmas holiday model. His Christmas drops. I am now the spirit of Halloween, and we do our Halloween scavenger hunts. There's still a few holidays folks can claim.
Well, walk us through what do you actually do as a practical matter on Halloween?
Yeah, so for the last since 2020, I work with a small group of artists. We initially did location-based installations and made it a full scavenger hunt. You go and get to each spot and get a clue. And that year was the 12th anniversary, so the first 12 folks who filled out the form actually got a pumpkin filled with candy and art and stickers and all that type of stuff. After that, I switched a little bit, and so each year I'll do some. I will cut out the platen or cut out the substrate. It's gonna be some Halloween themed shape, and then for however many years of the gallery, we get that many artists who donate a piece of art on that piece, and then I go and hide it, and then we just do an Instagram story based scavenger hunt, and first person who finds it gets it.
So much fun.
And it's a great way to, you know, I like, you know, one year it was all spots that were ghosts of 1975, places I've had, were important in the history of the gallery. Um, you know, everyone who participates, you know, I always ask them like, what place is important to you? What would you like to showcase? Is there a business? Is there a show? Is there, you know, I think one of the coolest ones this year was Shane Durgee, uh, who hid a piece. You know, I hid his piece of art at the Spiritualist obelisk, which after all this time I had never realized it was down there
Huh.
on the side
Yeah,
street
no,
of Troop Street.
it's unassuming, yeah.
Just a fascinating little piece of Rochester and spiritualist history, you know, spooky history. So when possible, we try and you know interject little history lessons or um, just call outs, like I said, call outs to different businesses, new businesses, things like that. Um, get people exploring the city a
Yeah,
little
what
bit.
I love about this, of course, is it's a game,
Yeah.
right? And you're doing it on social media, so it's engaging the public.
Mhm.
It's really fun. And so I appreciate that I mean, you're a very creative guy anyway. So this is really an expression of your creativity. All the things you do are an outgrowth of that. To the extent you are willing to, I recently talk about your art collection. I recently asked you to give a talk for Rochester art
Oh yeah.
collectors on the topic of Gen X as
Yeah.
as a sort of demographic category as collectors, sort of coming of age as collectors, and of course it's not. I mean, it's a kind of I came up with this thing randomly, and then you tried to
Yeah.
compete with it, which
And
was
it pushed me into that. I was like, I don't want to speak for that. We don't like being people telling what we are.
well, right. But I
Speaking
do
for the rest
think
of us.
your eye, you are drawn to certain things
Yeah.
that are what I'll call non-traditional. So I'm a baby boomer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see the things that you love and I appreciate them, but I'm not drawn to them in the same way that you are. And I think there's
Yeah.
some generationality to that. What's just chat a little bit about your collection to the extent you're willing to and you're
Yeah,
comfortable.
yeah. So, but the one thing I do want to do in the spirit of the scavenger hunts and the giveaways, um, there's two that are coming up that by
Oh,
different folks. One, of course, is Magnus. He goes by at Magnus Apollo. His annual Christmas giveaway, which is fantastic. It's stockings filled with art that is donated by local artists. Again, first come, first serve. It's just again through social media. And then a newer one that's only been around for a couple years is share some rock love, and that's ROC love. And they are doing baskets of goodies between Black Friday and New Year's. It's a
oh,
really big spread. So they just got on my radar this year. But again, it's like fun ways, you know, and sometimes, you know, like even with Magnus, sometimes it's artists donate stickers. You know, it's something that, you know, it's not a big ask. I know with my stuff, I try not to do a big ask. I'm like, spare supplies, spend a night on your piece. You know, don't, you know, and of course artists are always gonna, you know, don't tell me what to do. They go awesome above and beyond to create really fantastic works of art that get out there for folks. Um, but yeah, as far as my own collection, um, I always joke it's you know kind of to talk to what Matt said, going around, and if I bought everything, you'd have this house filled with joy. It's overflowing, and that's just my house. That I am your lack of, if you had a lack of self-control, that would be my house. Um, so for me, it's rooted in it began with inspirations. I started collecting the skateboard artists that I looked up to when I was working in a skate shop, looking at their walls. Why, the sketchy show is so important to me. It is driven so much of the last 37 years. And then I started looking at who do they shout out? Who are they talking about? And then from there, by that point, I was, finally had refined my own tastes. Um, it is all over the map. I mean, sometimes I buy a piece because I like a swoosh in it.
mhm.
I may like a piece, and the name of the piece just sends me over. I'm like, that's funny. You got me. So all the artists who name their artwork Untitled One. Ah, you're missing the sale. I mean, if we're gonna talk pure business, like a business thing, like even if it's a nonsensical title, it may be enough to resonate with the viewer that can spark a sale, and help keep you moving along.
People do tend to buy the story. They want some entree, some way to connect with the work.
Yeah, and I mean, I have plenty of untitled pieces in the collection. But whenever I work with artists in 1975, I'm always just like, can we do something? Can we come, like your favorite lyric, the music you were listening to, something like that. Um, because yeah, like some I'm like kind of looking off, staring at the one wall. Um, you know, I can tell a story about almost every piece on the wall. What was I doing at that time in my life? What led me to buy the piece? Why did I like it? Things like that. Why did this artist inspire me? Why did I want to give money to an artist to help support? It always to help support, but what was that connection that drew me to that person, that piece, that art? So, and I've been doing my own version of the fantasy game, just but with real money for the last.
Well, I'm with you, man. With you.
I'm going a little crazy, but no, yeah, and so and there's varying themes. A lot of my work is that I collect will be, there's a lot of illustration work. There's a lot of two-dimensional in here. I've been trying to branch out more sculptural. As I'm staring at right behind here is a sculpture by Salou and a Peter Pincus
Wow, cool.
vase, a vessel. And we've got photography, we've got art by Hal Nazem behind us. It's artists I've worked with. I try and collect. And then, I mean, it goes on. I am, I have like a side Instagram profile, one of the many that I don't use enough, called the Hoarder of Cool, right?
Oh,
And
right.
it's, my father is a real hoarder at time, of construction things and all that. So I was like, well, I hoard, but at least it's, of cool stuff. Um,
Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about your collection and the work you've done over time. And we're going to circle back and talk
yeah.
some more. But let me pull Nick in. Nick, who is a photographer,
Yeah.
street photographer, among other sorts of subjects, and also more recently has done some curatorial work. So, Nick, what's up?
Not much, just resting now after the last,
Mm.
6 months of planning and 2 months of delivering.
Yeah, curation's hard. It's some work.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fun though.
Yeah.
So how did it, well, tell us more about the backstory of that and how did it get started? You did a part two, but did you work on part one?
Yeah, so part one was last November.
Oh, and what was
I
this?
had
Oh, could you?
thanks to the streets. Ooh, did I mute myself?
No, you're good. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so the part one was thanks to the streets. Last year it was me actively thanking people who I worked with, or just I talked to artists who inspired me to take photos of just things, street art and graffiti and loud things. And from there I did a lot of work at Frank's Chop Shop, just because they put on the art shows every month and I like the vibe. And from there he had offered me a spot to do a show, and I was not wanting or ready to do a solo type show, and I was like, well, I'll just get all these people together that I've dealt with and start that. And then it was mostly graffiti and just photography. And then this year I was transitioning more towards just the graffiti end, because that's what I'm most, at least right now, passionate about, and just kind of riding that wave. And
Talk a little about your process. Are these folks you already knew, so you knew the work, and did
no,
you engage with them on what was chosen, and what was your process like?
for the gallery part, it's basically I like your stuff. Show me something cool. I don't have any real stipulations or guidelines behind anything other than I want you to show your stuff. And that could be, you could have never shown before. You could have just wrote something silly on the street and it just made me laugh and I found out who you were. So now come, let's try and get your stuff out there, try and sell some things. And It's just the type of person I've always been. Just help people out with things. So it's
And
just
Frank's kind of a
transitioning
cool
from,
venue because they show work from other locations in Rochester. They'll bring artists in from New York
yeah.
City, particularly, right? So, are any of the folks you had in your shows, were they all local, or where'd you find them?
This year was mostly just Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse,
Ah, okay, so it's
and
the region.
just whether a lot of the things of how you get on my radar is if I took a picture of something you did. So I'm like, okay, I found out who that person was. I really like it. Let's try and build a relationship.
And the
That's where that
shows that
goes.
you worked on, I think both of the shows had work for sale.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about, how did you sort out things like, did the artist pick the pricing? Did you help them? How did you all sort that out?
Yeah, artists pick the pricing. Matt actually helped me with a lot of that for the first show with because I have come to this having no idea in this realm of selling things and getting people together, having at least a little bit of paperwork and doing that. So he helped out a lot with that. And
And
lost train of
were you
thought.
sort of in charge of managing the transaction, or did the artists do that themselves?
I like to do the transactions just because so a lot of times artists can't be there on opening night, and that's when, at least in my experience, things are selling opening night. So I just do the transaction and then just get the money to the artist as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm. Talk about your own work for a little bit. I know you happen sometimes to photograph motorcycles. I'm a rider, so
Yep.
I love the shots you take of folks on motorcycles.
Yeah, I mean, I just like flashy things, so I'm very distracted all the time. So whatever catches my attention, I'm going to do my best to get a shot of it. But I really like motion and seeing motion in a shot, or freezing. Like, if I'm doing an event or something, you want to see what's going on and at least have a little bit of emotion behind my stuff. Whether you know what kind of emotion is it in me, what it brings out in you is what matters.
Well, that's where all the energy is, right? You present the work and people respond to it, and you sort of see where the conversation goes. So are you planning a solo show? Is this something you're working towards, or it's not really an
I mean,
interest?
if I have little ideas, but I'm not. I mean, nothing soon. It wouldn't be for a while, a couple
And
of years maybe.
when you think of your own work, do you think of it thematically? Do you sort of these are certain kinds of things I do, and I put them in one category, and other kinds of things I do, I put them in a different category?
Other than when it comes to graffiti and street art and stuff, and then everything else. Those are kind of, but I don't like
Mm.
separate them or plan on what I'm going out for. I'm just going out for a walk, and I have my camera. So
When
whatever I feel that day.
when I see your work that depicts graffiti, it has a strong architectural story also. You're not doing close-ups, details necessarily of writing, but you're putting the work in a typically urban context. Is that
Yeah,
something you're
it's
going
just
for?
more. Yeah, because it's like if you get too close, you don't know where it is. You at least know it's on a city street or it's up high or something like that. I try to give that vibe at least, like because we can all go around and just document, and I like to put a little flair on it.
Well, I love the architectural feel of it, but it also speaks to, in many cases, what someone had to do to get there to make the work, the
Very
physical
much so.
requirements associated with actually making the work in those locations. So that's kind of implicit with the images.
Yeah, it's definitely some work for some of those spots.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, let's go ahead and open the conversation up more broadly. And I'm going to put a provocative question out there. And anybody can answer. So take your mute off and just jump in. I'm curious to hear where people would rank the Rochester art scene from boring, I'd rather stay home and, make pancakes, although you might love pancakes, to absolutely amazing. It's never been greater. It's off the charts, fabulous. What are you feeling about the scene? Is the region a hotspot, or is it kind of dull and boring?
Good question.
Well, I'm not from here, so I'm super biased based on where I'm from, which is the middle of nowhere. Rochester. The only reason I've stayed in Rochester as long as I have is because of the art scene. It's the only reason I'm here. Like boring day job, great weekend job. I volunteer at Roco. I have a studio at Muck Duck. Like everything here, art wise, is leagues ahead of where most of the other parts of the region are. Like, I've lived in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, the whole 9 yards, and there's just nothing. And people are not very supportive of each other. So the comparison to that, it's like an explosion, and it's super positive. I know people from
How long have you
here,
been in town?
about 3 years, which is long for me.
So have you seen any trajectory, any trend? You say, oh, it was better before, it's a little better now, or what do you over that time?
I've noticed that it's almost like a stilted by our own success. We're all doing so much all the time that there's no way to ever do all of it at this point. When I first came to town, it felt like you could maybe get around to most things. But now I feel like there's so much all the time that I'm missing 80%, which is also in and of itself a positive thing, because that means there's always something for somebody at all times, like at least one thing a week that you could be doing art wise. So,
Mike, you've begun to present your work in public fairly recently. What's your read on the local scene?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't really looking at the scene, even though I've been around for a long time, because my attention was really to other things. My background, and I tend to be very focused. So, I've been in science, so I was focused on that. Then I was running my own business, I was focused on that. Even though I've been doing photography since I was 14, but it wasn't my main thing.
Well, more recently, you've had a show, you had a solo show I went to, which was quite impressive. You've presented work in group shows. How are you finding that experience? Is it vibrant? Is it kind of quiet?
It is very helpful. I mean, my solo show was not well attended as I was hoping, but I've had last year I was at Woco. It was very well. My piece was really well received, and I'm also at Woco this year. I was at the Red Show, so I've been trying to move. I was at the library, so I've been really trying to move around, and right now I am thinking of presenting a proposal for a solo show, because you probably have noticed that one of the things I'm doing is combining my photography with my poetry, which I feel is unique. So I'm trying to put together a solo show probably around that piece, which I think is kind of unique.
Yeah, and you're an accomplished author. You've published more than one book, poetry, but also nonfiction, some research, and so forth. So you're well acquainted with that world. But you're also pretty adept on social media. You're active, posting your work, engaging the public. How are you finding the reception to what you do on social media?
It's I would like to have more following, especially on Instagram, but I've been very active, but it hasn't really turned out the sales as I would like to see. But I've had very good reception from people. I mean, I have good comments.
And Adam, I'm sorry, Adam, what are your members telling you about the local scene? What do you hear? What's the buzz within your community? Do people feel like it's pretty vibrant, or it's kind of boring?
I would agree with Reagan that I would say the artists are feeling inspired, that our community is growing, it's changing, it's becoming more inclusive. More funding opportunities are becoming available to artists. So I would say that it's becoming very vibrant, and that there's lots of good hope and change for the future, especially for artists that want to become full-time artists, want to make a creative career. So as we grow and improve and get help from like our local leaders with funding those ideas, um, there's a lot of good change that is happening.
And Kelly, you have a unique place in the conversation around funding for the arts. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in your professional life, your non-artistic professional life, creative in its own ways, but
Certainly
not
creative.
directly making art.
You know, it's
Why don't you tell people what you do so that there's some
okay.
perspective?
Well, so the joke is that I wear many hats. I think at some point I need to like commission a portrait of myself with like 47 hats stacked on my head. And that might cover the number of jobs or positions or places I take up in the community. But so I am the legislative aide to Councilmember Mary Lupian. So I support her in serving the East District of Rochester, making sure that constituent services are handled, helping to support her when she looks at legislation for city council, and even just looking at other cities or other communities or challenges that we have in our own community and trying to find ways that we can use city tools to support that. So
Is there more arts funding, or is that just a myth?
there has been some increase in arts funding in Rochester. Honestly, historically, like if you look at the way our city has grown over the last century and a half, I'd say, there was a time in our history where there was a ton of funding for the arts because it was seen as, because of the people, the businesses that were here, that were our hallmark.
I mean, like Eastman, who funded the
You had
arts.
Eastman Kodak,
The Bausch and Lomb family.
Bausch and Lomb, you had Xerox, and I mean, especially George Eastman providing some of these like foundational funding for like the RPO. But like it was, these were very well-heeled executives that were their financial donations to the community, or even just like supporting their parties, was a lucrative business for artists in the Rochester area. I think there was an exhibit over at the library that was talking about just the receipts from one party from George Eastman. My background, prior to my existence as a legislative aide, I'm the artistic director of Origami, which is an internationally renowned company that creates large-scale balloon installations. And one of the receipts for George Eastman's party was for festooning. And man, George would have kept me in the black like year round, year round. But, with the loss of those businesses and the loss of that income, and kind of the change in the way that as a community we fund art, like when you're accustomed to having a big pot of money and a lot of largesse, it takes a while to transition into like different forms of support. Some of the other
the city is being very directed about its interest in it being engaged in the arts, and it may not be a perfect world, but there is some energy in that direction, right?
I believe there is some energy. I think part of the challenge is though that like I think part of the reason that our community has had such a thriving arts community is that historically we've been a very affordable place to live. So you didn't have to have multiple jobs in order to support yourself, have a little studio space, or have some time in your day to dedicate to your arts practice. Where now I think artists are feeling that economic impact of, the rent is quote unquote too damn high. Right. And so it makes it hard for people to just support themselves in their artistic journey. So what I would like to see is more focus on meeting some of our basic needs and letting artists have time and space to dedicate to their practice, whether or not they decide to exist in a, in this sort of capitalist world where we have to sell our artwork in order to like live our lives. Because there is art for art's sake. Art is expression. Art is, how we contemplate the world and how we share our view and share what's inside of us. And it's also, really cool stuff that I put on my wall to like make my day brighter. Yeah, so like I think there are some opportunities for more funding. Me, I want to make it more accessible and more transparent and easier for people to get to so that
Mm,
that way everybody has a chance to do it. It's not just someone who knows when the grant drops or when
right.
how to fill in the form.
Right. Matt, what do you seeing out in the world? What's your take on the scene?
I think that Rochester has a lot of really incredible creative communities. I think that what's really cool about this place is that Muck Duck serves a type of community. The Artist Collaborative serves a type of community. The Yard serves a type of community. I think similar to what Kelly said, it often reminds me of like New York in the 40s, where you can be the starving artist who can afford a space. I mean, folks will visit my studio at the Yards from Boston, New York, wherever, and they'll ask how much I pay in rent, and then they'll start kicking the, you know, punching the ceiling when they find out because
Yeah.
it's pretty much, unheard of, in other towns and communities. I think that we're in a really interesting spot right now because a lot of the places I just mentioned were born from the pandemic.
Mm,
A great deal of artistic energy sort of coalesced during that time period. And now we're five, I don't know what is time anymore, 5 years later. And we're kind of seeing what's happening to those places. I mean, not to put Adam on the spot, but I think the Artist Collaborative is a perfect example of something that started organically and it's developing, and now it's finding its footing in terms of how it's going to survive.
mm,
I'm not going to put anyone on the spot, but we've lost some along the way. And
mm.
I think we're kind of in a time period now where we've seen venues close that opened during the pandemic or around the pandemic. We've seen arts organizations and collectives and a lot of great places that were born from it. We're going to kind of see if they sink or swim now. There's a weird generation gap in Rochester that I think really needs to be resolved. I will say too, I think my hottest take is that with much respect to what the city does to try and fund arts in our community, the thing I would really love to see happen is a sustainable arts economy that's supported by the people who live here through the purchasing of art and the purchasing or engagement of an arts economy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I would really love to see an arts economy that doesn't rely off of, you know, philanthropy or government funding, but it relies off of buying and selling art. I grew up with a lot of dudes in Webster who would rather have a jet ski than an oil painting. And I think it's a hearts and minds kind of issue. It's understanding how the arts contribute culturally, and enrich our community. And um, I wish we could do more to kind of promote that. I think there's a lot of places that do. I think about Eric and his work with pop culture. That's kind of the spaces that do that. I think about Frank's Chop Shop and their work with, I guess, also pop culture, but more like, rap music, hip hop,
Yeah.
photographers who are shooting that kind of work. And I think there's a lot of bridges and we need to connect more of them. And I think that what is kind of a bummer to me is that when I look at the working artist of Rochester, meaning the artists that I think are like making a living and live here, a lot of them don't work. They
Yeah.
live here, but they don't work out of here.
Mm,
Their work exists somewhere else. Their exhibitions exist somewhere else. Their career exists somewhere else.
yeah.
And I would love to see more working artists who are here,
Can
you know?
thrive here in our community. Well, that's actually a great way to end the conversation because we're coming up on an hour. So I want to thank everybody who was willing to come on tonight and spend an hour with us talking about the game, talking about the local scene. And let me just quickly remind listeners that we're going to have one more podcast in this limited series on January the 14th. We're going to be talking about the big reveal. We'll update everybody on gameplay. Go to reddotchallenge.org. That's REDDOT challenge.org. So that's where you can find everything out about the game. Thank you for coming. I hope I see you guys soon. Happy holidays. Good night.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rom.
Welcome.
Bye, everybody.